Welcome back to Crime Scene. On this episode, we're going to cover the Raincoat Killer Yoo Young-Chul. This happened in South Korea, and I learned about this case probably about a year ago. And when thinking up of this show, I thought, man, I want to cover this guy, because when I read it, it was one of the first serial killers I learned about, and I was like before I even looked into like Jeffrey Dahmer and Ted Bundy, all the popular ones, this is one I read about, and it was like, it's really not known, surprisingly, but it's still just as fucked up as the other one. Without further ado, let's get into it.
Yoo Young-Chul was born April 18th, 1970, in Gochang, South Korea.
Gucci Gang, South Korea. Yes, Gucci Gang, South Korea.
Yoo was raised in a poor household, and his parents separated due to money issues, causing him to envy a large house. This caused him to have resentment towards the rich. When he was 14 years old after his aunt died, following tradition of transferring the remains into an urn with chopsticks, he put one of the bones in his mouth. Now, before we get into the murders, let's look into Yoo's criminal past. Between 1988 and 2000, Yoo had 3 theft charges, 2 of them landing him in jail, one for 8 months and the other for 10 months. He was charged again with theft, as well as forgery and identity theft. For this, he was sentenced to 2 years in jail. Yoo was sentenced to 2 years in jail and fined 30 million South Korean won, which is about equal to 27,000 US dollars, for selling child pornography, and in 2000 was sentenced to 3.5 years for child sexual abuse after he raped a 15-year-old girl. During these crimes, he married his girlfriend on June 23, 1993, and they had a son, born on October 26, 1994. Though after his arrest for the rape of the 15-year-old girl, on October 27, 2000, his wife divorced.
I think that's, when you get convicted for raping a 15-year-old girl, I think that's grounds for divorce.
Young-Chul spent the next 3 years in prison, and on September 11, 2003, finished his sentence and was released. 2 weeks later, he committed his first murder. Yoo targeted wealthy elderly people. His first 2 victims were a 72-year-old man who he stabbed in the neck, then hit him in the head with a hammer. He then killed the 67-year-old wife of the first victim with the hammer as well. 3 weeks later, Yoo killed 3 more people the same way as he did the first 2, with his hammer. Yoo's third victim, a 60-year-old woman, who was beat with the hammer, survived the initial attack, and was found by her son at 1:30 p.m., but she unfortunately died by 2 p.m. On November 18, 2003, Young-Chul killed 3 more people the same way, bludgeoning them with a hammer. This time, though, he tried to break open a safe in the house, but injured himself while doing so. To destroy any evidence, Young-Chul burned the house down. During the investigation, the police believed that the trauma to the head of the victims was due to falling debris, so they did not suspect foul play was involved. Many of the murders he committed on the elderly he made to look like robberies, but since no money was taken, this confused the investigators. In December of 2003, Yoo met a masseuse, and they eventually began dating, but soon after the relationship began, she found out about Yoo's criminal past and told him not to see her again. Out of revenge, Yoo started targeting escorts. In January 2004, Yoo was arrested for a minor theft charge, but was released 2 days later. On March 16, 2014, Yoo targeted a 23-year-old girl. He choked her to death, mutilated the body, and dumped the remains near Sogang University. His next victim is unknown, but what is known is she was a masseuse that he lured to his apartment, beat her unconscious with a hammer. He then proceeded to decapitate her in the bathroom, smash her head, mutilate the body, then dispose of it in a construction site near Bongwon Temple. 11 bodies were discovered from that mountain during the investigation. He followed this form of killing for the next 9 victims, all of them being escorts, and the murders happening between May to July of 2004. He would call the women to his apartment, have sex with them, then he would dismember and mutilate the bodies to make them unidentifiable. On July 15, 2004, Yoo was captured by police near Grammar at 5 a.m. after he had raised suspicion by calling a massage parlor where several of the employees had recently gone missing after receiving similar phone calls. Because of this, the owner of the parlor, a few employees, and an officer went to their agreed-upon meeting place waiting for Young-Chul. The police officer had left before Yoo arrived, but Yoo was apprehended by the employees of the parlor, and another officer arrived and arrested Yoo. When being arrested, Yoo explained his motives in front of a TV camera, saying, quote, "Women shouldn't be sluts, and the rich should know what they've done." During the initial interrogation, Young-Chul confessed to killing 19 people, but soon after he admitted killing a 45-year-old male street vendor. And on July 19th, Yoo confessed to killing 26 people altogether. The list of the victims included a few people that didn't fit Yoo's pattern of wealthy seniors and masseuses. Friends of 2 of the victims whose bodies had been recovered claimed they were not involved in massage therapy. Starting in April 2004, there was a killer known as the Rainy Thursday Murderer, who was actively stabbing multiple women late at night during the same time as Young-Chul was committing his killings. The police could not connect Young-Chul to those murders. Several days later, Yoo confessed again to another murder. That happened in February 2004, the murder of a woman who worked at a clothing store. Young-Chul suspected her of being a prostitute. He had approached her, questioning her, pretending to be a police officer. About a month after his arrest, Yoo confessed to eating the flesh of the victims. While no evidence has proved this, there is proof that he burned at least 3 of his victims and ate the livers of some of his victims as well. While in custody, Yoo pretended to have epileptic symptoms and escaped from the police after they had loosened his restraints, but he was caught only 12 hours later. Yoo had also used this tactic while he was arrested for the rape charge in 2000. While being detained, Yoo faked an epileptic seizure. There was an incident where Yoo was being brought to the prosecutor's office, and a mother of one of the victims charged at Young-Chul, screaming that her daughter would still be alive if the police had captured him earlier. A policeman kicked the mother in the chest to subdue her. He claimed he kicked her because his hands were occupied holding Young-Chul. When Yoo's apartment was searched, it caused speculation that Yoo patterned his murders off of movies such as Public Enemy, Very Bad Things, and Normal Life. Yoo also confessed to being inspired by serial killer Song Do-young, who had murdered 9 wealthy individuals in Busan, South Korea from 1990 to 2000. Police admitted they had little physical evidence to link Young-Chul to the murders, but they still were able to convict him. At the start of the trial, Yoo refused to defend himself. He boycotted the trial and apologizing to the victims. Yoo also boasted about how he had no intentions of stopping. When Yoo returned 2 weeks later, he lunged at 3 presiding judges and retracted his confession for the murder of the clothing store employee. He refused to show up the next court session after he tried committing suicide the night before. Yoo 3 weeks later disrupted another hearing when he tried to attack a spectator who cursed him. After this, Yoo signed a statement saying that he would not cause any further commotion. Prosecutors requested the death penalty, which Yoo thanked him for. South Koreans were appalled by his crimes, which brought about the discussion of capital punishment in South Korea. While it was still legal under South Korean law, it had not been carried out since 1997, and appeared that it might be abolished before Yoo's arrest. But support grew for the death penalty after learning of his crimes, and Yoo Young-Chul was sentenced to death on December 13, 2004, for 20 counts of murder. The clothing store employee charge was thrown out. Even after prosecutors appealed the verdict to secure the 21st charge, it was upheld by the Supreme Court. The Seoul Central District Court said, quote, "Murders of as many as 20 people are unprecedented in the nation, and are a very serious crime. The death penalty is inevitable for you in light of the enormous pain inflicted on the families concerned and the entire society." Yoo Young-Chul is currently being detained at the Seoul Detention Center on death row, waiting execution. Now this is a part of the episode where I want to try and help find a missing person. Hania Noelia Aguilar. She is a 18-year-old Hispanic female. She's 5 feet tall, 126 pounds, with black hair and brown eyes. She was last seen wearing a blue shirt with flowers and blue jeans on November 5th. She was last seen outside her house in Rosewood Mobile Home Park located in Elizabethtown Road in Lumberton, North Carolina. She was in her front yard heating up her car to go to school. She did this every morning, so if someone watched her, they could catch on to this and know when the opportunity was possible. The kidnapper had very few minutes to do this. There is surveillance footage of a man walking near the front yard right before she was kidnapped. Witness saw a man dressed in all black and wearing a yellow bandana forced Hania into a relative's vehicle that was in the driveway. The vehicle was a green 2002 Ford Expedition with South Carolina license plate NWS 984. The vehicle has been found, but Hania has not. If you have any information, call 910-272-5871.